Typically what happens when you're dealing with anxiety that stems from a fear of social situations is the fear is triggered by this opinion that something bad's going to happen, that you're going to face some sort of rejection, that people are going to judge you. And if this is the case, you are dealing with something that you really should get some help with, because you may actually want to join the crowd, but it's your nerves and it's your fear of rejection and judgment that keeps you from doing it. Before you label yourself as someone who has social anxiety, have you ever considered maybe you're just bad at small talk and you hate being fake at big gatherings? Is it possible? I mean, it does make you stop and wonder. We've all had that feeling on a Friday night or late on a Saturday where you've made plans and then all of a sudden, as it gets closer and closer to you needing to get off the couch or to head home from whatever it was that you were doing and get dressed and get ready to go out again, you start to feel this heaviness and this dread in your body, right? You've had that feeling before. You're like, ugh, do I have to go to that birthday party? Ugh. Do I really want to go to that fundraiser or out to the bar tonight? Oh, why did I say yes to this? Well, before you start to label yourself as somebody who has anxiety, social anxiety, right? I want you to stop and consider the difference between social anxiety and just actually not liking big parties. Seriously. I'm going to teach you the difference in this video. So if you're struggling with a form of social anxiety, all of that behavior that you feel, that dread that you feel, right? That heaviness that hits you right before you're about to go out, if it's social anxiety, all of that heaviness and that dread, it is literally triggered by the fear of doing it. You start to think about what's going to go wrong. You're scared that something is going to go wrong. You start to get nervous about what's going to happen, right? It's this feeling of intense dread. That's kind of the feeling of what it's like to have anxiety about social situations. And here's the irony of the thing. You may actually want to go to that birthday party. You may actually want to go to the concert. You may want to go out to the bar tonight to your friends, but you feel this dread kick in as you think about doing it, okay? That's anxiety caused by social situations. The other thing that I mentioned is maybe you just hate small talk, right? Maybe you hate being fake. That's me. And that's not a feeling of dread. The avoidance that you're feeling, this resistance to going, is due to dislike, not dread, dislike. Big difference between anxiety caused by social settings and simply being somebody like me. I hate small talk. I hate pretending that I'm interested when I'm not that interested. I hate big group settings. I'm really more of the kind of one-on-one, small group, deeper, more intimate conversations kind of gal. And so before big parties, I just kind of get this like, ugh, do I really want to do this? Because I'm not the kind of person that likes what's required to go to a big networking event. So here's a surprising fact. You may feel the dread, the fear, the kind of anxious feelings that come with a big social situation, but you may still want to go. And that's how you also know that this is probably more in the lane of fear and dread and anxiety than it is just disliking small talk. You know, if you're thinking about like, I'm going to embarrass myself, or what if this happens, or what if that happens, or what if I have to go to the bathroom, or what if my face turns red, or what if this, or what if that, or what if I see that person, that's more dread. That's more fear, and that's more in the lane of anxiety. So the next time you're in a situation, I'm going to give you some questions in order for you to help yourself flush this out a little bit more, okay? Before you're like, oh, for sure, Mel Robbins, it's fear, it's dread, it's definitely a form of some sort of anxiety that I'm feeling, just take a minute for a second and ask yourself this. Is the reluctance and the resistance that you feel, is it just a sign that you prefer to be home? Not because home feels safe, but because you just like being home by yourself better. That's number one. The next thing that you should ask yourself is, does the nervousness or the dread or the resistance that you feel just mean that you're the kind of person that likes deeper conversations? You prefer to be around 2 or 3 people. You're not the kind of person that loved being at fraternity parties when you were younger or loved the big social scene, that it just is sort of like, ugh, I could do without that. Like, I'm going to be happier if I never do one of those things again. Or is the nervousness and resistance more because you're afraid something bad's going to happen? See, if it's something bad's going to happen, that's more in the lane of dread, right? If it's more in just like, I just kind of have a preference here. It's not that I think something bad's going to happen. I just prefer something else, which is where the resistance comes from. Here's another question that you can ask yourself. Are you nervous because you're going to see people from your past or see people that you think judge you, or because you're going to be put in a situation where you feel like you're going to have to explain yourself? Now, it may surprise you to know that I'm somebody who feels all of these things. I just prefer to stay home. You know, I bitch all the time that I don't have a great social life, but the truth is I kind of prefer to stay home. I feel like I'm missing out when I see everybody at these big parties, but then I think, well, actually, I don't really have fun at those things. You know, I was just with my best friend from childhood this weekend on a business trip. We often meet up and see one another while we're on the road working. And she said to me, she said, you know, Mel, a lot of people don't know this about you, but you're actually kind of a shy person. You know, I know that you have this big persona and you can get on a stage and you seem to be very outgoing and energized by talking to people. But the truth is, the Mel Robbins that most people don't know, you're like a shy person. You kind of stick to yourself. You've had the same friends for a very long time. You're not somebody that's ever out and about and at lots of different parties. You kind of keep your circle tight. And so I'm telling you this because I think that oftentimes if you're extroverted in your work or extroverted in some aspects of your life, you put pressure on yourself to be extroverted everywhere. The truth is, even though I'm very extroverted in my work, I'm a homebody at heart. And, you know, my husband is very introverted. And that just means, by the way, if you're introverted, that you get your energy drained when you're around people. I tend to have my energy amplified when I'm working and I'm around people. But the second I'm done working, I just want to go home and sit on the couch, if you know what I mean. And so whenever Chris and I, Chris being the introvert, me being sort of extroverted, but I really, you know, kind of prefer small gatherings. Whenever we get invited anywhere, we're both so excited to see people that we like. But if it's a party that's bigger than like 3 or 4 couples, I always feel this resistance to going. And it's not because I'm nervous, and it's not because I think something's going to go wrong, and it's not because I'm running through scenarios in my head. That would be an indication of some anxious feeling about social gatherings. I just have this kind of weird resistance because I know I would prefer to be at a smaller gathering. That's it. It's a preference because I can't stand small talk. And I can't stand pretending to be interested when I'm really not that interested. And so I prefer deep conversations with just a handful of people. And don't get me wrong, I mean, every once in a while, every one of us needs a massive blowout with a DJ and a dance party and an all-out, just amazing time with a big group of people. But just the small talk thing, not my thing. So if you're sitting there going, you know, Mel, as you're talking about this, and I'm thinking about what I feel as I'm pulling up to a big party, it's not a preference. It's really about dread. It's not that I favor smaller group, it's that I'm actually afraid of larger social situations. And typically what happens when you're dealing with anxiety that stems from a fear of social situations is the fear is triggered by this opinion that something bad's going to happen, that you're going to face some sort of rejection, that people are going to judge you. And if this is the case, you are dealing with something that you really should get some help with, because you may actually want to join the crowd, but it's your nerves and it's your fear of rejection and judgment that keeps you from doing it. And so here are some like quick signs that this is you. Number one, you feel anxious because you think something embarrassing is going to happen. Or maybe in the past, you had something embarrassing happen. And so it's sort of you relive it over and over and over again in your mind as you're about to step into another situation that's similar. When you are at a party, you avoid talking to people that you don't know or have never met or don't know well. Another thing that you might find is that you start to fixate and worry about things that we all do, like forgetting somebody's name or sneezing in the middle of a class or everybody suddenly turning and looking at you and you forgetting what you were going to say and then your face turning bright red. Maybe you are worried because you're worried about going to the bathroom while you're at this big party because you have nerves about having to go to the bathroom in public. That's actually pretty common. Maybe you find that you're at these parties, but you're fidgeting and your leg is shaking, or that you're constantly looking at your phone. You're constantly gripping your phone. Instead of being at the party, you are managing your fear about what's going to happen or something bad happening by burying yourself in your phone and texting people who aren't there. Or finally, you are fixated on the idea that everybody is thinking about you and that you assume that people don't like you. If these are starting to be like, God, that's me. Every time I do go to the bar, I'm assuming people are judging me. Wow, when I get invited to a birthday party, I have this weird feeling that they actually didn't want me there. This isn't you disliking something. This is dread and fear that falls into the zone of anxiety around social settings. So, what do you do? Rule number one, understanding it is super important. So rule number one is you just gotta name it. And I don't want you to say, I'm anxious, I have social anxiety. I want you to say, I'm feeling anxious whenever I'm in a social setting. Because you are not your thoughts and feelings. And when you name what you're feeling, and you say, I'm feeling anxious whenever I step into a social setting, something really cool happens. And this is a study that was in the upward spiral. And what they found is that when you put your feelings into words, namely you start saying, I feel this nerves and this fear and this anxiousness in a social setting, rather than going, I'm anxious, and labeling yourself. When you put your feelings into words, something really interesting happened. So they did this study where they had people take a look at photographs of folks that were having really emotional facial expressions. And what happens is if you look at a photograph of somebody who's like, well, your amygdala in your brain immediately activated and read the emotions in the picture. But as soon as you're asked to name the emotion you're seeing, oh, I see anger, the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex turns on and it reduces the emotional amygdala reactivity. In other words, by consciously recognizing and naming the emotions, this is so cool. When you name the emotion, I'm feeling afraid, nervous, or anxious about this thing, naming it reduces the impact internally that you feel from that emotion. Pretty cool, huh? So number one, you are going to name what you're feeling instead of labeling yourself with it. The second thing that you can do is you can tap into cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, and that just involves making changes to the way that you think and feel about a situation. So what you're going to do is you're going to identify patterns of thinking that cause you to want to avoid social interaction. So for example, if you tell yourself nobody wanted me here anyway, and then you fixate on it. Or another example might be that the last time you went to a party, your dress ripped and it was really embarrassing. And now you think about it every time you go to a party. When you identify the pattern of thinking that makes you then feel bad, what you can do is you can then adopt more positive self-talk to encourage and coach yourself through that fear. The third thing that you can do, you're going to hate this, but it's called situational exposure. Just gradually reintroduce yourself to those situations that make you feel nervous, afraid, or anxious. And, if you fear large groups, for example, just start by going out with a friend one-on-one, and then work your way up again to a smaller group of friends, and so on. And by the way, therapists are super awesome in terms of helping you with situational exposure experiments and methods. Another thing that you can do is you can ask people for help. just tell people what you're dealing with and ask somebody to give you some extra support. Key to the support in helping an anxious person become more independent over time is you not relying on them all the time. So for example, yeah, invite your friends to go with you to things. But you've also got to realize that you are going to need to start to come out of your shell. So for example, if you want to help a friend that is really anxious, invite them to do things. And when you're out at the bar, or you are out at a networking event, or you are out doing something fun, bring them into the conversation, ask them questions to help them come out of their shell. Another thing that you can do if you're socially, you get nervous in those kind of situations, is as you feel yourself getting nervous, just do the 5 senses technique, where you feel the nerves or the fear or the anxiousness rising up. Take a deep breath and then ground yourself in the present moment. What do you see? Look around. I see the camera on this desktop computer. What do you smell? I can almost smell that it's cool right now. What do you hear? I hear kind of the buzzing of the light bulbs in this room that I'm shooting in. What do you feel? Oh, I feel my cat, Mr. Noodle, and his awesome fur. What do you taste? My mouth is kind of dry right now. I literally just brought myself into the present moment with you. And you do it by taking a deep breath and then noticing what all 5 senses are feeling. And finally, you got to be kind to yourself as you're doing this. If you're trying to lower the nerves and the fear and the dread that comes with social settings, it's not going to go away overnight. It is going to take consistent effort on your part, because the truth is, at this moment in your life, for whatever reason, any big social situation makes you feel a little nervous. That's okay. Happens to a lot of people, but you do want to attack this head on, because the more you isolate and the more you avoid the things that you're afraid, the bigger the fear is going to get. And so, number 1, analyze what situations trigger this. Number 2, break it down. How can you think about it differently? How can you change the situation next time? Ask for a friend to support you. And remember that generally, people are way more focused on themselves than they are focused on you. And they're not scrutinizing your behavior half as much as you think they are. In fact, they're probably not scrutinizing it at all. You're so busy in your head scrutinizing yourself. Everybody else is basically doing the same thing with themselves. And so I want you to understand that with consistent effort, with a little bit of a commitment from you, with some help from some friends and perhaps even a therapist, step by step, you can name this fear, you can face this fear, and through the actions that you're taking, this dread will start to disappear, and you may just start to love those big social things that you've been avoiding. All right, so that's the difference. I gotta sneeze because my cat's hair is now in my nose. But before you label yourself as somebody that has social anxiety, I want you to stop and just ask yourself those questions. Is it dread, or is it just dislike? Maybe, just maybe, I just like small talk. Maybe I just don't like fake conversations. Or maybe it really is a fear. And it's a fear that I want to face because I am tired of sitting home alone because of it. And now you know the simple things that you can do in order to start to take control. All right, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, you should watch this one next.